A warm welcome to viewers from all over the world. Welcome at this roundtable session from the Circular Climate Booster. The Circular Climate Booster is a series of web events in which we collect best practices and recommendations from the circular plastic and textiles world. These recommendations will be brought forward to the World Circular Economy Forum. The World Circular Economy Forum, WCEF, is initiated by Sitra, a Finnish organization, and hosted by several countries. This year, 2 countries will host 2 different events. We'll start this year, this week, April 15 and 16, with an event hosted by the Netherlands, the WCEF+HighClimate, and later this year in the fall we have the World Circular Economy Forum 21 hosted by Canada. We have organized webinars on textiles and plastics with experts and entrepreneurs from all over the world, and the outcome of these webinars are the input for the session today. The outcome of the session today will be the input for the World Circular Economy Forum. My name is Marieke van der Werf. I am from Springtide International, and it is an honor to host this conversation between high-level people from the public and the private sector with a connection to the WCEF. I will introduce them to you now. First, I say good morning to Mrs. Brownlee in Canada. Mrs. Michelle Brownlee is Director General Policy Strategy of Environment and Climate Change in Canada. Also, a welcome to Mr. Jan-Peter Balkenende, former Prime Minister and Chair of the Dutch Sustainable Growth Coalition, of we will talk later. And last but not least, Mrs. Stientje van Veldhoven, Minister for the Environment in the Netherlands and host of the WCEF in April, later this week. A very warm welcome to you all, and I think the viewers are very interested in hearing what you have to say. I would like to start with you, Mrs. van Veldhoven, because it was your idea to have this series of web events, textiles and plastics, and also the name Circular Climate Booster, the connection. Why was that?
Well, I think, first of all, of course, it's a big honor that the Netherlands is allowed to host the WCEF this year, and we wanted to focus on climate, because I think that one of our best-kept secrets is the fact that there is such a strong linkage between the circular economy and the achievement of our climate goals. There is no way that we are going to achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement unless we also go circular. It's about 20% of those goals that we will need to fill in through a circular economy. So that's why we need to boost the circular economy in order to reach our climate goals. So it's now our best kept secret, but I hope that after this spring, it will be our worst kept secret, because we need to tell everybody about this very positive agenda and this positive contribution that the circular economy can make to achieving our climate targets.
Great ambition. Thank you. This session is divided in 3 blocks. First, we have a look at the best practices throughout the value chain of plastics and textiles. Then we have a block of recommendations in which we hear what the participants had to say to you. And we also have Block 3, which is the way forward, and we see how the takeaway of this session can be of value for the WCEF. There's also a role for the audience. Questions can be asked, comments can be made, and well, very good questions we will pose to the guests at the table and in Canada. So please, it's greatly appreciated if you participate. I would say let's start with block 1, the best practices, and then we start with a video on textiles.
With a predominant take, make, dispose principle, the textile industry is one of the biggest polluting industries in the world. Circular strategies have proven their potential to make the shift to a more climate-friendly value chain. And best practices can be found all around the world. great examples allow to save thousands of litres of water during the production phase by dyeing clothes with a technology using CO2 or by recycling water usage. Retailers with initiative allowing to collect pre-owned and damaged clothing and to turn them into good as new pieces. Or businesses with a leasing model are shaping new ways to consume. Concerning recycling, some technologies enable the automation of sorting large volumes of mixed post-consumer textiles. And upcycling transforms post-consumer textile waste into new garments, accessories, or stationery products. All these separate initiatives can, together, make a global impact. But what are the conditions for change? The conditions for opportunities to upscale and for new collaborations to emerge.
Yeah, it's amazing, all the things that already are going on. The dynamics on circular economy are really enormous. I'd like to start with Mrs. Brownlee in Canada. I'd like to hear what your examples are, where you're proud of concerning the circular economy. But first of all, since you are hosting the WCEF 21, please tell us something about that. Why did you want to host it, and what can we expect?
Thank you so much, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever everyone happens to be today. Thank you very much to Minister van Veldhoven and the Government of the Netherlands for the opportunity to speak at the session today. We're quite pleased in Canada to be hosting the WCEF 2021 this September, and to be working so closely with the Netherlands and the Finnish Innovation Fund, Sitra, towards that agenda this fall. Part of the reason that we're so interested in hosting in Canada in September is because we do think that there are some unique considerations of North America that we can bring forward to the event in the fall. We have a lot to learn from the early movers like the Netherlands and other countries, but Canada is a little bit unique. We have the second largest area in the world. We're about 240 times the size of the Netherlands, for example, with a low population density, a diversity of landscapes with a number of major cities, but also quite a diverse number of rural communities, remote indigenous communities that are part of our cultural and economic identity. We also have a very resource-based economy that's export-oriented. So we have a lot that I think we can learn from the early movers in this space. So we think that some of the unique experiences that we have in North America will be of interest to other countries, and that we can learn from what other countries have done first. And I say that this is a very interesting year for the circular economy. It's been 5 years since the WCEF first started, and we're very keen to look back on what has been the successes from those first 5 years and think about where can we go in the next 5 years. So to the second part of your question, where can we go in those next 5 years? I do think it's a lot about learning from those best practices and scaling up those ideas and making them much more impactful and mainstream, quite frankly. So I'd like to give you just 3 examples from Canada. The first is at the local level. So there's a city called Guelph in the county of Wellington in Ontario, and they're working hard to become Canada's first circular food economy. They have a goal around this, which is reimagining an inclusive food system using a 50-50-50 model. And the idea is to increase access to affordable, nutritious food by 50%, at the same time growing 50 new circular businesses and collaborations. And the idea is that they'll increase by 50%, unlocking the value of food waste. I'm quite pleased that the Government of Canada was able to support this initiative at this local level. The second example I would point to is the forest bioeconomy, where in Canada we're already applying a number of circular principles. This is cascading materials and using residues to produce value-added products, such as bioplastics, biofuels, and green chemicals. And then the third example I would use is, again, from a resource sector, because that is certainly one of our context points in Canada, is around mining. So Canadian mines are also becoming increasingly sustainable, responsible, and climate smart by being more resource, energy, and water efficient, and just overall trying to reduce their environmental footprint. And we have a new Canadian minerals and metals plan that has circular economy as a pillar. So I'm very pleased that that's an integral part of our plan on mining. So again, I think these are 3 interesting examples, and our real challenge is to think about the ways to bring these to scale and make them mainstream. Thank you.
Absolutely. looking forward to hear more about it. But in a session like this, we have to do it with these topics. But thank you for sharing them with us. We go to the introduction video on plastics.
Plastic is an amazing invention, but it is also one of the largest environmental threats. Circular strategies have proven their potential to create climate-friendly solutions for the plastic industry. And best practices can be found all around the world, each one of them solving various steps of the value chain and reducing the carbon footprint. Think of 100% mechanically recycled food-grade bottles. Simply eliminating plastics in the design phase of the value chain. Think also of new business models developing a logistic chain allowing for reuse of packaging while keeping it convenient and affordable for the consumer. Or of new models for demand and use, such as a refill model coming directly at the consumer's doorstep and leaving the choice of quantity to the consumer. But also of game-changing upcycling initiatives empowering local waste pickers and closing the loop with innovating technologies allowing to transform all type of used plastics into virgin quality PET. All these separate initiatives can make a global impact. What are the conditions for change? The conditions for opportunities to scale and for new collaborations to emerge.
Global impact, that's what we're looking for. Mr. Balkenende, being a chair of the Dutch Sustainable Growth Coalition, please tell us, what does the coalition do and what's the relation with plastics?
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me to be here and with the minister. I think it was great that we started talking about textiles. Last week I spoke with a director of a Dutch company, clothing producing company, state of art, and their strategy is called Responsible Together, and it's about the circular economy and sustainability. That's great, it's just a concrete example. The Dutch Sustainable Growth Coalition is a coalition of 8 multinationals, and our intention is to fully integrate sustainability into business models. So that's the reason why in 2015 we already published a report on the circular economy, and recently we published a report called Transition Time, a Circular Economy for Plastics. And let me give some practical examples. Of course, you know Unilever, and you know the Magnum brand. Well, it's about their packaging. So what they have now is packaging that is reusable, recyclable, and it's made of post-consumer recycled material. I think this is a beautiful example how we can change things, and they will scale it up. Another example, Philips. For example, Senseo coffee, you know that. Well, but they have now equipment that's called Senseo Viva Cafe Eco. And what is it all about? It's about how can you use plastics for making the new products. So it's a very concrete example, and it makes it visible that you can reuse materials. Yeah. And last example, the KLM. You know there are a lot of plastic bottles in the planes. They're collected every time, and these materials, the plastic bottles, are being used for refurbish them into other products for maintaining the aircraft. I think it's really great. So you can see that it is possible to change things, and that gives me a good feeling. Be practical and make the difference.
Good. You said a very interesting word, business models. Yeah. Because is this cost money, or is it a business model in the long run?
This is exactly the point. If you talk with Ellen MacArthur, you know her very well, of course, she is the one of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. She always underlines the fact that if you are choosing the circular economy, it can also be very beneficial. There has been a time that people thought in terms of sustainability as cost rising to extra costs. Yeah. But if you are convinced that you have circular business models, it also can be very beneficial. It can lead to profits, but it requires innovation. You have to rethink your business model. That's really the key.
We get to that, the innovation it requires. Thank you. Ms. van Veldhoven, to you the same question concerning plastics. What are you proud of?
Well, I'm proud of so many things, but indeed I am most proud of all those entrepreneurs that are actually doing it. And there's so many companies out there, so many innovative minds and thoughts that have taken this concept of the paper into practice. And if I can mention two very, let's say, smaller scale companies that have really made a big difference, I'd like to name Ionica, and they are turning any kind of plastic and textiles into virgin materials. They are returning it to virgin materials. Fantastic innovation, small company, but that is really growing their scale at the moment. And another concrete example that I'd like to mention is Schijvens Textiel. It's a Dutch family-owned textiles company. And I often say textiles is a new plastic, because it often is plastic. And they are producing 100% recycled materials for their clothing. And they are doing this in collaboration with companies in Turkey and Pakistan. So through the innovation in one small business, a family-owned business in the Netherlands, they are now transforming a global chain. And that is the kind of collaboration that we need. And I must say, coming back to what Canada said, it's fantastic that in the context of this WCEF, we bring together global partners, because it's only going to work if we work together. And I think it's fantastic that Canada is taking up so much, but also in Africa, in Asia, and Latin America, things are moving. And they're moving because all of these, well, of course, politicians and people like us, but mostly those entrepreneurs are actually putting this into practice. Makes me super proud.
Yeah, and you're so right, because it is a matter of working together on a global scale.
Absolutely.
2 weeks ago, I had a meeting with 20 high-ranked CEOs from Japan and the minister, your colleague, for the environment. And it was all about how can we lay the right connections, what can we do more, what can we learn from each other. And this is hopeful.
Absolutely.
Great. And do you see a difference in the speed of the path between textiles and plastic? Or can they learn from each other? Or
Absolutely.
what could you say about that?
I think plastic was the first time when, let's say, across the globe, people started to realize we actually have a choice. We do not have to accept these beaches littered with plastic. We can decide to do it differently, and we can decide to solve this if we join forces. And I think plastic has shown us the way, and I think textiles can follow that path. It requires different business chains, but textiles is so much of a chain sector that I think there is great potential for textiles.
Yes. Thank you. Well, I have a presentation. I can present something to you concerning plastic. Holland Circular Hotspot and the Dutch Knowledge Institute TNO together have made a brochure, and it's called A Circular Economy for Plastics. And in it sketches the challenges, but also the opportunities and the perspective. It's richly illustrated with examples, best practices, all through the value chain, and Director Marinke Wijngaard from TNO will present it to you. So let's switch to the video.
Within 25 years, 87% of plastic waste can be reusable, but only if governments, industry and consumers accelerate the circular plastic transition now. TNO designed 4 accelerators for this: changing the plastic ecosystem, developing new recycling technologies, applying true costing, and stimulating producer and consumer responsibility. I'm honored to present Minister van Veldhoven this brochure. It explains how the Netherlands can accelerate the circular transition.
And this is the brochure mentioned. It is for you, Ms. van Veldhoven, but also for you, Mr. Balkenende. And Ms. Brownlee will see to it that you will receive it as well. Then we move to the second block that is about the recommendations from the webinars. And for that I invited to the table Mr. Ruben Dubelaar and Freek van Eyck from Holland Circular Hotspot, because they hosted these webinars, so they can tell us what happened there. But not only that, we also have an impression of what the participants said.
Experts from all over the world have been sharing their vision on how to scale up the transition to circular economy. Entrepreneurs show courage, are responsible for investing and scaling up, but they cannot do it alone. One of of the main conditions for change is regulations and incentives.
What I see is our biggest partner is government. As soon as regulation is there, you see dynamics.
Government needs to either look at incentives by lowering taxes or input duties to improve and increase recycled content.
Collaboration is essential.
The circular economy means creating new relationships.
I think the biggest piece that brought everything together was finding a partner in a retailer that would actually push this out on a bigger scale.
Innovation and innovative perspectives are essential for system change as well. But how do we get there?
Is the need to form a new value chain and the need to collaborate differently across that value chain.
Create flexibility for new technologies.
Smart experimenting and move ahead, even if you need to do a step back later on.
Every stakeholder has its role to play, but it takes leadership to get there.
Because the consumer votes for the future they want with what they buy.
But retailers need to act as the editor of the choices, edit out bad ones, and make more circular choices easy, convenient, and affordable to access.
To convince the consumers to stop buying rubbish.
Inclusiveness should not be overlooked.
We must think of including this informal market and the most marginalized people in emerging markets. Doing it fair, doing it inclusive, and doing it local.
Skills are also very, very important, trying to raise awareness on circular economy in the academia world.
Let's make climate impact by going circular, and let's use this magic momentum that is present today.
What the webinar brings us are 5 general recommendations, and we put them to be helpful in a slide. And what we see is it needs speeding up. Circular economy needs regulation and incentives. It needs directives and it needs subsidies and maybe taxes, flexible taxes, also CO2 pricing. EPR also. Collaboration, we heard it already, we talked about it already. Inclusiveness, I think, is very important. Also to create skills to participate. Knowledge and innovation. TNO was also committed, but space, room for experimentation and circular business models. There we need innovation. And leadership. Who is it? The government that takes the lead? Is it the industries? Or is it someone from a knowledge or an NGO that will take the lead? So, and also, is it the manufacturer or the retailer? Questions. I start with Mrs. Brownlee. If you have a look at these recommendations, what would you think have been very effective, and which will you stress in the next years?
That is an excellent question. Thank you very much for it. And first I would just say this is an excellent set of recommendations. In Canada, we hosted in November a WCEF+ online side event along with the United Nations Environment Program and MIT Solve. And we convened 200 North American stakeholders for conversations just like this and found a very similar set of recommendations. So it's lovely to hear that there's some consistency, a large amount of alignment across these events and the conversations that are being held. And they're absolutely the right set of 5. And I think one important recommendation that cuts through all of them is around a narrative, a story, and the communications of circular economy. So part of hosting the WCEF in Canada is certainly around collaboration and leadership on the part of the Government of Canada with partners. But it's also, I think, about bringing forward the story of circular economy. As was said at the outset, we don't want this to be the best kept secret anymore. We really do want this to become mainstream and a solution that folks look to right away. So, and I do think that communications and story element is something that comes across through all of these recommendation areas. Certainly being able to have concrete recommendations, concrete examples, pilots and case studies that we can point to and scale is very important. And another part of it is that oftentimes when we're talking about climate or its twin crisis of biodiversity loss, we're coming at something from a point of trying to solve a problem and coming from a need of urgency around a problem. And I think the circular economy as a tool can move forward our agendas on climate and biodiversity, but from a point of opportunity. It really is about what is possible, what more can we do, with so many benefits to everyone who is involved in it. There's cost savings in business models and opportunities for everyone. And on that point, I think one of the key points for me is that inclusivity recommendation. So in bringing the WCEF to Canada, we're going to put specific focus on making sure we have the global north and the global south represented, that we do have the countries who have made those first steps there to share their lessons learned, that we have those that are maybe one step behind, like Canada, who are there to really learn from it, and that we also bring forward the voices of youth and Indigenous peoples, because they have a unique perspective that can come to the conversation as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, maybe we lost some insights along our industrial way. But let's not go there. Ms. van Veldhoven, I'd like to pose the same question to you. Looking at these recommendations, what is effective and what do you think we should stress?
Well, I think she rightly points out the need for the narrative, because the story in our mind, let's say, gives our heart a path to follow. And this leadership in all these elements of the sector is really what we need. If we put our mind to it, we can put a man on the moon, we can clean the beaches, and we can achieve the Paris Agreement goals. And I very much like what she said too about the positive contribution. The circular economy means that you can have a more beautiful planet with better biodiversity, and also in the context with more inclusiveness, and also in the context of a population, the world population that will grow to 10 billion people. There is really no alternative. So it really is an opportunity to provide for all of those people. And that's one of the things which I like very much about this excellent report that I was just handed over. But of course, I had the opportunity to take a small glance in before. There's going to be a huge growth, especially in the developing world. And so if we want to ensure the inclusiveness of this development, we're going to need a circular economy. It can help us to drive that in an eco-friendly way while preserving biodiversity. I think next to CE and climate, the other big silos that we need to break apart and bring together is biodiversity. And I think Canada is doing a fantastic job in putting that more at the forefront of our discussions. So I think leadership and bringing these entire chains together. No one can create a circular economy alone. We need each other. And if we bring those together, then we can start to make speed. And that is what we need.
Thank you, but I think also the viewers and the participants on the webinars would like to hear you saying something about these incentives and directors being the government.
Of course. The government has to play an important role too. We need to ensure through pricing, we need to ensure producer responsibilities, incentivize, create incentives in the system. I think we also need to start, especially in the global south, think about how do we work with the informal sector. I think we need, for example, mandatory amounts of recyclate in new products so as to create markets, and then, of course, leave it up to the markets to find the best technologies to fulfill those elements. We need to take care of our global goods,
so
of our common goods.
Society, businesses and government together.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Balkenende, we're talking about the public sector here, but what can business do to accelerate circular economy?
The Minister correctly pointed at the Sustainable Development Goals. And number 17, I'm a big defender of the SDGs, is partnerships. And why? You cannot reach the goals without the right cooperation. That's true. And that's what we need. And of course, the governments have to play a role. At this moment, we have the cabinet formation in the Netherlands, so that is a moment that we could have maybe a bit higher budget for the circular economy. I'm sure you'll use your influence.
I won't be opposed.
You have the you have the role of the government as a launching customer. That's an important role. You have regulation, finance, and so on. But talk about the business sector. I think it starts with rethinking and redefining your business models. You already mentioned that. You have to be creative. And it also counts for the whole value chain. Let me give an example. If you talk about plastics, the first question is, do we need plastics? Are there alternatives? The second one is, if you want to use plastics, make it in any case recyclable. Think about the future. So there's a matter of being very, very creative. And then the third point, that has to do with innovation. I'm really convinced that things can be changed if you have the right innovative mindset. For example, the sorting techniques for plastics. That's a very complicated issue, but if you're able to change it, then you can have the changes. I think this is really very, very important. And I also would like to underline we need everyone, governments, businesses, but also the world of NGOs and universities. And the Director General correctly told about the young generation.
Yeah.
If I see what's happening here in the Netherlands, a lot of universities, the University of Applied Science, they all have integrated the SDGs into their curricula. So we really need also the young generation and the researchers. So, and if we would have the
institutions.
Yeah.
That's another one of the partners that we really need.
Just please say that again.
Financial institutions. I think there is a huge role for financial institutions in financing literally those new business models, and there's a lot of work there to be done as well.
Oh yeah. What you're telling now is completely right. Let's say during a long time it was about the growth of GDP. Yeah. It was about the financial results per quarter, every quarter of the year, and now it should be much more the long-term focus and the social and ecological fundamentals. That's really good. Yeah, you're right.
Will it be addressed in WCEF in April?
We are working on this, absolutely, yes. I think finance is one element of the entire system that we can absolutely not do without. And so it's also fantastic to see how many financial institutions are seeing how important it is to be really future-proof. If you want to be future-proof, you need to be climate-proof, you need to be circular economy-proof, and so there's really a lot of movement. But there's also a lot of knowledge development, experience still to be developed in the financial sector. It's great to see they're really moving.
And we need to speed up everything. We are not on track at the moment.
That's right. So we need to speed up, but we also need some money. Do you have a figure in your head?
I'm waiting for the cabinet formation, but of course, I mentioned the issue of the budget. Yeah. What is the budget regarding the circular economy? This is really key. And the Netherlands is really front runner, you can say, in different domains. In some domains we are walking behind. When you talk about renewals, for example, in circular economy we are doing well, but we have to much more. For ethical reasons and economic reasons.
Right. Yes, thank you. We go to Ruben Dubelaar. You were host of the webinar Textiles. What is your takeaway from that webinar?
Yeah, thank you. Well, as you've seen in the video, I think we have seen some great examples, some great entrepreneurs, inspiring. You know, they talked about what they do, and we went through the value chain because I think this is a great platform because it's all about, you know, we're talking about sharing innovations and sharing knowledge, and this is how we start, you know, by highlighting the best practice that we see along the value chain, so we can learn from each other. And of course, then we also see that a lot of the technologies and the knowledge is already out there. So it's not only about the innovation. The difficult part for textiles, it's a worldwide industry, you know, with, of course, a lot of, you know, it's worldwide. If you sort here, maybe, you know, the sorted materials need to go to the other part of the world. So that's very complex. So that's why we need collaboration and platforms like these, you know, to really see how we can implement and in-scale. Ms. Brownlee already pointed out the innovations, and I think that's the biggest part. And I think all speakers stressed, it was already highlighted, that, you know, we need the regulations and incentives also by the government to help to scale up, but also to create transparency throughout the value chain. Where do feedstock come from? Where do materials come from? And also, can we maybe put a price on the more polluting technologies? So with that budget, we can finance, you know, the more sustainable ones. And of course, it's about, you know, the education and sharing technologies and knowledge to create awareness amongst consumers, but also to make sure that we have some overarching guidelines on circular design. And
overarching, does that mean worldwide, or?
Yeah, I think, you know, as the industry is worldwide, I think, you know, it's about sharing knowledge. How can we design in a circular way? I think that's useful. That's, you know, we put it together, and if we design it in a certain way with certain materials, that we can also make sure that it can be recycled also in the other part of the world, and that's how we should collaborate, of course.
Product passports, then.
Yeah, product passports.
And what do you think the participants in your webinar would like to hear from our guests?
Well, I think something that really stood out was Kriti Tula. She's from India. She had a nice company, Doodlage, and they work on upcycling, you know, textile waste. And she said, well, textiles, and it's something, you know, everyone wears it. So it's also a way to communicate to people and to reach people. I think dynamics in India are very different than here in Europe. So it's also a way to convey our, you know, story about sustainability and to reach people. So my questions would be also, how do you think that personally, do you agree? And also, how could the government use the tool, let's say, of the industry to reach everyone in the world to convey this, well, let's say, more sustainable message?
Yeah. I also have in my ear the question from Mud Jeans: stop people, consumers, from buying rubbish.
Yeah.
And it's okay. So let's hear Ms. Brownlee in answer to this question. Can the textile industry also be a force to change consumer behavior and create awareness?
Thank you. That's an excellent question, and I do think that is absolutely possible. Textiles being one of those things that we do touch every day, all throughout the day. So they are inherently personal, and that is the opportunity to communicate with individuals about their footprint and about their actions. I think what is interesting for us as policymakers and as conveners and collaborators, as we try to make this happen, whether it's in textiles or any other sector, is to really tell that story. And sometimes what's really important in telling that story is having those examples, having those people that are out there at the forefront, but also having some metrics and some information that we can provide to them. It's something that I think has helped us in Canada on the plastics front, because we were able to say, if we were to achieve zero plastic waste in Canada by 2030, here are the benefits. And we could actually put numbers beside those benefits. So for Canada, that's 500 million Canadian dollars of annual costs avoided. That's a big deal. That's a lot of cost avoided, especially in the current context. Nobody wants unnecessary costs. That's 42,000 direct and indirect jobs. That's a really big deal too, especially in the current context. And you know, that's 1.8 megatons of annual GHG emission savings. So when you can concrefy or make something concrete like that and really have those proof points and the evidence around it, then I think that your narrative and that story that you communicate to everyone involved in the value chain is that much stronger. And kudos on the new report, because I think it does an excellent job of putting those metrics and those numbers out there, which I think is exactly what we can use as a conversation starter with everyone in the value chain.
Good, thank you. But Mr. Ruben asked another question, and he asked, do you have an example personally concerning textiles and your personal shopping? Is there something you have in mind concerning textile, circular economy and climate?
For Canada specifically, or for me specifically? I'm sorry, I don't quite understand.
If you, as a person, personal, do you have? If you go shopping, your textiles, is there something? Are you aware of circular and climate?
Absolutely, and I think one of the things that, as a consumer, as I've been following circular economy for the past 3 or 4 years, so I think I would consider myself an early mover, as I've been doing this for 3 or 4 years. Is you know, first, it's the true hierarchy of the R's, right? So do I need something new first when it comes to clothing? Can I reduce the need that I have? Can I avoid this purchase? But then if I do find that I have to make a purchase, can I make it by being an informed consumer about what is truly the best solution? And I have to say, last summer, when the pandemic context first hit, I took up running again, because of course a lot of activities were off the possibilities. So running, however, I could do in my neighborhood. So I needed to invest in running clothes, which I hadn't had in a decade. And I spent a lot of time researching it, actually, and I ended up going with bio-based fabrics that could then be basically composted at the end of their lifespan. I think the challenge is there were fewer options. I did find the Canadian manufacturer, which was important for me. It did cost a little more, though. So, I mean, part of it is getting this to scale so that the cost barrier and those information barriers for consumers aren't there in future.
Thank you for sharing this personal note with us. It's appreciated. Ms. van Veldhoven, the textiles industry and consumer behavior. What can you say about it?
Well, I think it's these examples of how you buy fully circular are fantastic. I hope I'll be wearing a beautiful circular dress also at the WCEF forum. But that's, of course, making a statement. What also is important, I think, is that we look throughout circular economy is more than recycling. So make conscious choices is also about, do you buy clothes which you can wear only 6 weeks or that you can wear for 6 years in the sense of how fashion sensible are they. So I think there's many choices to be made. I think public procurement is also important when you talk about textiles. We use textiles everywhere. It's not just clothing. Textiles is also carpets. It's also curtains. There's a lot of textiles out there, so we can make conscious choices. And let's say perhaps an interesting example is the chauffeurs here at the department needed new suits. And so there was an option, there was a pilot, they could opt for circular suits. And all of the drivers wanted to use the circular suits. So that was fantastic. It created a lot of awareness. So I think these full choices are important for the story. They're about creating awareness. But what I find also very important is, for example, what we did in the denim deal, is every jeans gets a 5% circular material. Every jeans.
Yes.
So because consumers don't walk around all day with their list of everything they need to take care of and to pay attention to. It should be the new normal. And by starting to put 5%, at least 5% in every jean, I think we are also making big differences. We need the stories and we need to scale up.
And that way you also create a market for second-hand materials. So that's good.
Create a market for second material. Yeah.
We go to thank you. We go to Freek van Eyck. He hosted the plastics webinar. What's your takeaway?
Well, I can be generous. I can share a few key observations, actually. Like Mr. van Veldhoven said, plastic has a unique momentum that we can use. We can identify with it, and we are aware of the environmental impact. And the good thing is, as we've heard and have seen on the videos, there is so much happening from the side of entrepreneurs already. Every corner of the world and every part of the value chain. So I think Canada can be really proud of Ice River Sustainable Solutions. The Netherlands can be proud of Ionica. We've seen leaderships from Friesland Campina. A brand said, we don't know if it will work, but we will redesign our beverage cardboards without plastics, and we'll see if it works. So learning by doing, actually. We've seen new business models which are not geared at the waste management phase, but actually at us, the consumers, what we can do. And that's about refillable, reusable packaging. And it's a business model about convenience, about fair pricing in America, but also in Chile and now also in Indonesia. Especially for plastics, collaboration is key. Everywhere in the value chain, from the beginning to the value chain to the end. Public and private actors working together. But it's also about big retailers, big brands who can make the difference by closing the loop, by using local materials or by co-financing an initiative. But then again, the downside actually, it's not enough. Businesses can't do it alone. And it's a sad story because the externalities are not priced in, there's a value chain deficit, so in the end we will need government. We need some new regulations, and regulations, they go slow. No, the devil is in detail, there's some opposition, enforcement is typically very difficult, so that's tough. But finally I want to point out the reality of the emerging countries, because imperfect regulation, yes, no, well, let's say no enforcement. Sometimes in some countries 50% of all the plastics there is imported, and it's already difficult to handle their own material. A huge informal sector, a huge need for awareness, for skills, and difficult to get access to financing. So we need more initiatives like also Mr. Green Africa from Kenya, where a recycler teamed up with the informal sector, but also applying new technology, and he got a big boost from working together with a retailer. Which said, we close the loop here in Kenya with local material. That's actually what we want.
Yeah. And what would your participants want to know from the people here at the table and in Canada?
Well, what is the big elephant in the plastics room?
Tell me.
I was saying that these emerging economies reflect probably better the global reality than the so-called developed countries, where they only manage to recycle 50% of packaging, for example. So I would like to know from regulators, from the big brands, what can we do to change the reality in emerging economies?
Okay, good question. The emerging economies, what can the brands do there?
You mentioned Kenya a few years ago. I was there. I had a meeting with 300 entrepreneurs. It was fantastic because it was all about sustainability. It was about renewing their own position. And you already felt at that meeting that we are living on one planet and we have also the common goals. So if you have the SDGs, it leads to common goals, but also common language and common strategies. I think this is really key. And you're completely right. If you talk about responsibilities worldwide, take into account those countries that are suffering at the moment, but also have opportunities. And I think that's also the reason why some of the members of the Dutch Sustainable Growth Coalition said, we want to change our policy. And that has to do, for example, with the fact that how can you engage your suppliers? A company like Philips, they have a clearly defined policy to get all the suppliers active in the world of sustainability. You can help each other. And Unilever, they have a program for the farmers in other countries, third world countries, that also they can contribute to a better world. So there is a responsibility for the big corporates to be very active regarding those local players. And I think this is a good thing of the SDGs and also the circular economy. We can reach the goals, but we have to work together. We have to be creative. And as I said to you, we are running out of time at the moment, so we have to utmost to bring forward those changes and those solutions. I'm happy, I must say, with the whole atmosphere that's changing. It's about the SDGs. It's about which type of economy do we want, which type of capitalism do we want, what about the business models, that you can see it everywhere. But also you can see we have new views, but we have to speed up developments. We need actions and measurements. The Director General from Canada correctly said it's about metrics. And also very important, we already said it, involve the young generation, use their creativity. So much on our agenda, but you're completely right. We have to rethink our own position, also as the big corporates. You're right.
Yeah, yeah. And from a regulatory point of view, how can we make a difference in emerging countries?
Well, I think it is indeed a very, very important point to start thinking about how can you involve the informal sector. And if the big corporates are starting to change their policy and the government is willing to put in place a mandatory amount of recycled plastics, then there can be a business case for the informal sector. And so we need to think about smart solutions that can work also in developing countries. Of course, what we are trying to do here in the Netherlands and from the Netherlands in Europe with, for example, the European Plastic Pact, is also to find out how. By bringing everybody together to show that things can be done, and then it's easier to then see how you can translate that to other parts of the world. So we need front runners, so that and the front runners also need to feel the responsibility to take that message, to take their experience out there and to find new partners and help them get on the road to circularity too. But I find, like you, I see across the world, if I'm talking to Costa Rica, if I'm talking to Chile, if I'm talking to African countries, they see the need. They want clean beaches, they want a clean environment, they want also jobs, of course, in their informal economy. And I think all of these issues can come together in a circular economy, but we need to work together to get that done. And there again, financial institutions have a great role to play. What are you financing? Are you financing the next recycling plant, or are you financing a new oil drill? It's a choice, and the choice will define where we stand in 2050.
Yeah. And we have to be more specific. All the asset managers in the world are talking about ESG, environment, social and governance. But the real question is, what are the real criteria? And what can we do about it? Yeah. And if you could speed up that type of development, then you can see change. Last week you mentioned several countries. I had a meeting with people in Singapore, and it was a global conference. It was fantastic to see the quality of the debate. It was all about how can we change things, how can we speed up developments. That gives me hope.
So you also sense the sense of urgency there. Yeah. Because for climate it's there, but sometimes my feeling is we are not far enough.
Which countries are showing dynamism today? A country like Singapore, a small country of course, but you can feel that they want to change things. And if you are listening to your colleague, for example, the plans they have of greening the city and everything, it's amazing. Also from Canada, beautiful examples. In many parts of the world, you can see that the things are changing. And the good thing is we have to outperform traditional ways of thinking. That means you have to rethink the business models. You have to talk about economic opportunities. You can learn from each other. We need indeed those coalitions worldwide, and the good examples.
There is an inherent economic opportunity here, and I think Ms. Lee just already mentioned it. The fact that you're no longer spending money of getting rid of waste means that there is, let's say, an economic sphere of value that you can reuse. And an example that we have here in the Netherlands is we used to burn our old uniforms from the military and the police. And so we had to spend money on paying an incinerator for incinerating those uniforms. Now we're shredding them and making new textiles saves us money. We actually gain money now from getting rid of those old uniforms.
And probably saved CO2.
And we save CO2 and we save materials.
So
and
it's
if we are
win-win.
going to a world with 10 billion people, we are going to need all those materials.
You mentioned the fact that you also use longer products. For DSM, they developed chemicals that you can use products longer. I think these things are great.
Absolutely.
Talking about value, the audience is talking about true pricing. And true pricing means that the effect on the environment is reflected in the price. How do we deal with that? Ms. Brownlee, do you have an answer on that? True pricing, is that an issue in Canada?
Absolutely an issue in Canada, and it's been a very hot issue very recently in Canada as well. We have a national price that's applied to carbon, which is our first nationwide environmental price that's been applied. It's been an interesting event because we've had differing views on the constitutionality of that carbon price. But just at the end of March, the Supreme Court of Canada weighed in that it is within the federal government's jurisdiction to impose a federal carbon price, allowing provinces and territories to have equivalent systems if they prefer. So this has actually been a big step forward in Canada, where the debate, so to speak, around pricing for carbon has been put aside. And I do think it's an interesting one as we go further with the carbon price that will sort of make the proof point for how these systems can be designed well, and for providing evidence on what that actually means in terms of changes of behavior for households and businesses. And obviously there's questions about other things too. Are we paying the accurate price for water, for nature, for ecosystem services? But carbon pricing being kind of the front runner, the thing that's moving first, I think has proven to be very interesting in the Canadian context. And absolutely, this is part of what gets to it, is accurate pricing on all of those services and goods that we take from nature.
Thank you. I even see the businessman nodding here on my side. So
I think when we talk about sustainability, circularity, it is about honesty.
Yeah.
And if we have beautiful stories, but if the actions and the metrics are not in line, then you get difficulties. So therefore, I think initiative like true pricing is really great, because it's a matter of what are the real costs and are we willing to pay the price? And if you are not willing to pay the price, then it's not an honest story.
That's right. Yeah, Ms. Veldhoven, you would like to comment?
Yes, and if you're not paying the real price, then somebody else is.
That's it.
And that's either your neighbor from a different country, or it's your children or grandchildren.
Next generation.
Somebody is always paying the price. There's no free lunch in that sense. So we need to work towards true pricing, making it more visible. I think when we talk about climate in Europe, we have the emission trading system. Has been a very important step in the sense of pricing energy and production. But what we have in the Netherlands too is a price for every piece of package that you put on the market, and there is tariff differentiation of 40% between packaging which is easily recyclable and packaging which is not recyclable. And so I think these kind of incentives are starting to get into place, but we need that much more, so that the economy becomes an honest reflection of the actual costs.
Great, thank you. So that's already on the way to implementation. So we're moving ahead.
It is on the way to implementation, but much more to be done, let's be honest too.
Exactly. Okay, thank you. Also thank the audience for the questions, and Mr. Van Eyck and Dubelaar for presenting the questions from the webinar. Thank you very much. We move forward to block 3. And in block 3, we talk about the way forward. How can the WCEF accelerate the things we are saying here? And will some of the issues reach the discussion tables at the WCEF? Ms. Brownlee, I start with you. Looking back at today's discussion, how can the WCEF support the transition?
Thanks for the question. So absolutely, the WCEF is going to keep building on all these conversations that we've been having in the lead up to this week's event, and then continuing towards the event in September as well. I think it's very interesting that this is all about breaking down silos. Silos between different product streams, silos between business models, silos between stakeholders, silos between parts of the world, silos between different stakeholder groups. And I think that's exactly what we're trying to do in having these discussions and bringing them forward. So certainly on climate, we want to bring that momentum forward into our event in September so that the conversations that take place this week around the World Circular Economy plus climate continue towards the WCEF 2021. We also want to make sure that biodiversity and nature are prominent in those discussions as well. And when it comes to our event in September, we want to ensure that we're really focusing on the systemic changes so that we can truly accelerate the transition. That sounds like a really big thing, focus on the systemic changes and accelerate the transition. But I think it's the connecting of the dots between all of these things that really make that happen. So conversations like today's conversation are where we identify those dots and draw those connections between them. These are highly interrelated issues, and it's only by looking at them as systems that I think we will have that success moving forward.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. This week, the World Circular Economy Forum plus Climate is in the Netherlands. I already mentioned it, April 15 and 16. What can you, with what you heard today, do you think that has something to do with what's going on in the WCEF?
Oh, it's fantastic. It is really amazing to see all of the work that has already been done. Yeah. And let's not underestimate the value of the fact that we are discussing it, because discussing it brings new partners together, creates new insights, creates new inspiration, and certainly all these what I've heard today creates new inspiration for me, which I will take to WCEF+Climate, and I hope that we can all jointly inspire many more people to start working on this, to start spreading the message. Awareness is always the first step. Also to take action locally, personally, because we can all make a difference from the place that we are, from the responsibilities that we have. And I think it's fantastic that together the cooperation with Citra and with Canada has been amazing, it's been fantastic. So we also look very much forward to collaborating with them to prepare the Canadian conference this fall, because we should go to the COP in the end, and at the COP too, we should ensure that we link biodiversity, climate and circular economy very much together, because they are so much interlinked. And so let's hope that we can create from the real commitments to a real, let's say, a commitment also in the NDCs. We have so much work to do. This has been fantastic stepping stones leading up to WCEF+Climate, and we already look forward to continuing our stepping stone journey, because we still have lots to do, but jointly we'll get there.
Yes, thank you. And do you think this transition, we really can all participate? It is for all. It is just for all.
It's not only we can all participate. We have to participate. All of us. There is not going to be a circular economy if it's not global and inclusive, because these are worldwide chains, and we only have one planet. It is our common home. And so if one room sets the house on fire, the entire house is on fire. So we have no choice but to work together, and then I think we have a beautiful future ahead of us.
Good. Well, it sounds very promising. Mr. Balkenende, would you like to comment on that? Are you as hopeful? I think you are. But
let's say you always have to be positive and optimistic. Yes. But you mustn't close your eyes for the difficult issues and for the barriers. In the last years, we've seen a lot of geopolitical tensions. There's a lot of nationalism, protection. That's also in our world. But if you want to talk about our common home, our common future, a better world, then you have to act. And I think this is an awareness that's really increasing. Things are really changing worldwide. And now is the time indeed to speed up developments. I remember the film of Al Gore, An Inconvenient Truth. That was more than 10 years ago. It was awareness. Eye-opener. But now I think we've made progress. You can see that universities, governments, businesses, NGOs have changed their policies. There are new criteria, new KPIs. That's what I noticed within the Dutch World Growth Coalition. It's a matter of making progress. But you must be able to show the results. It is about honesty, it's about integrity, it's about future orientation, and very concrete steps. Therefore, I'm so happy with your attempts.
Addressing the barriers, because getting the barriers on the table is the first step to addressing them. Because we need to, and they are hampering us now, but discuss it, raise awareness, and create the right movement will also overcome those barriers.
It's all about responsibility.
From the corner of my eye, I see not only the time, but also Mrs. Brownlee nodding to all you say. A last word from yours, from Canada?
I'll just conclude by saying we look so forward to welcoming you from Canada, not necessarily to Canada, but from Canada in the fall of this year. Very happy to be co-organizing with the Finnish Innovation Fund Sitra. I think absolutely all of those barriers and all of those opportunities are there, and it's coming together that we will find them and overcome them. I look very much forward to the conversation this week and to bringing it forward to Canada in the fall. Thank you.
Yes, well, thank you. We all do, and we wish you lots of success. Thank you all, also the audience and the guests. What I hear is not only the environment and the ethical question, but also the economics, the business models, which are should be in place. Collaborative, inclusiveness, skills, etc., are very important to develop. But also the regulations, the EPR, the recycled content. Beautiful what you mentioned about 5% in the denim deal. I think that is where we're heading, and I hope that the WCEF can connect the dots, beautifully put, Ms. Brownlee, of all these aspects and create a systemic change, biodiversity, circular, climate, and economics. With that holistic view, it is what it is, but I think it can help us all and be our inspiration for the decades to come, and not only for the decades to come, also for the coalition agreement, Ms. van Veldhoven, that we are cooking here in the Netherlands. So thank you all for watching, and I wish you good luck in your work, but also in organizing the WCEF.
Looking forward to meeting you all.
We will. Thank you. That ends our meeting.